Hey everybody, so today I'm going to do a follow-up video about setting up a SSH keys or certificates so that when you are uploading content into your Git server on your Synology NAS that you don't need to enter the password. So SSH certificates is what people refer to this, and I'm going to show you how to set it up on your Synology NAS. So let's just get into this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to log in using the Git admin account that I created previously, and we're gonna go ahead and log in. Okay, now that I have logged in, I am going to create some folders and create a file that we're going to store our SSH keys in. So the first thing I'm going to do make directory .ssh. Okay. So if we look at this, we've created our SSH folder, and the permissions that we are going to set on this folder, just to make sure that we are good to go. So we are going to do permission 700 on SSH. Okay, the next thing we are going to do, is we are going to create a file in that folder called authorized keys. And then we're going to change the permissions on that file to 600. Very good. Now that we've created our SSH folder, so let me show you. If we go back to Git admin in our homes directory, you see here is our SSH folder, and then inside of here is authorized keys. So very good on that. So now within the authorized keys, now what we need to do is create the key itself. So in order to do that, we're going to do SSH-key gen. Hit enter. So it generates a public-private key pair. These two files are mathematically linked together. Enter the file which to save the key. You can name this whatever you would like. I'm going to leave the default, and it's going to be called id.rsa. The passphrase I'm going to leave empty. And this has now generated several files. So I am going to switch back here. And if we refresh this, you're going to see now that there are two files that were created. One is called id.rsa. That is your private key. The other one is called id.rsa pub. This is your public key. And what I'm going to do is download the public key to my client workstation, and we're going to install that as our SSH key. Oh, excuse me, not the public key. I'm going to download this private key, id_rsa. That private key I'm going to download and install on my workstation in the c:users/ your username /.ssh folder. I'll show you how to do that real quick. So first things first. Okay, so I'm going to select this. I am going to do download. I'm going to go grab this file, copy it. What I'm going to do then is I copied that file to users gvart SSH. So this is the path. So it's whatever your username folder is, and then just create a folder underneath there and call it ID RSA. That way it can find the private key when it's trying to connect to the server. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this public file and overwrite authorized keys. So this file, I'm going to copy it and call it authorized keys. I'm going to do that through the command line. So all I have to do here is copy that SSH ID RSA .pub, and I'm going to copy it to SSH authorized keys. And now that that has been done, the contents of that file will contain the authorized keys that are allowed to connect. And those public keys, if you look at these files, so the file is public, which means you can share it, right? And only a person with a appropriate private key will be able to connect to this workstation. Or sorry, not the workstation. We'll be able to connect through SSH to the Synology, or if they have the password. So now that that is set up, the only thing left to do is to try it. The first thing I'm going to do is try to connect via Putty, which is just a SSH tool, and then we'll try it with Git itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is, so now that I have this installed, when I try to log in using the private certificate, it should not prompt me for a password. So if I open up Putty, I'm going to load Git here, and then we have to choose for authorization, we have to choose the PPK file that we have for our private key. The problem you're going to realize here pretty quickly is, so if I go to my SSH folder, you notice I don't have a PPK file. The problem is that the ID RSA that I generated on the Synology is different format than what Putty recognizes. If you tried to generate a Putty private key, it's not going to work either because it won't understand that format on the Synology. So what you need to do is, in this folder, I'm going to open up this key using Putty Gen. So let me do that. And what we're going to do is we're going to convert the key that we got from the Synology into a Putty format it can recognize. So Putty Gen, here I'm going to load an existing key. So we're going to go to C users gvart SSH and ID RSA. Once I've done this, it says successfully imported. It's the old format, right? So the Synology is using an older format. To use this key with Putty, you need to save it as a private key into its own format. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to do save private key. Are you sure you want to save this key without a passphrase? Yes. And in this file, I'm going to call it ID RSA. But this time it's going to put the extension on it that Putty's looking for, and it's going to save it in a format that it can rescue. Oh, actually, it didn't do that, did it? Yep. So ID RSA, we're going to overwrite it. Yeah, there's no problem with that. So we're going to overwrite. All right. So now that that is overwritten, so now this file has a different format than what the has a different format. I'm going to rename it to PPK because that is the standard that Putty is looking for. So now that we have this, I'm going to open up our folder here, users, gvart, SSH, and here's our ID RSA PPK. Now that I have that, you also want to, now you should be able to connect. So yeah, so let me save this. So then I'm going to connect. When it asks me to log in, I'm going to type the name of the user that I'm logging in as. And with a little bit of help from our friends, authenticating with public key imported open SSH key. So this successfully worked. You notice I did not have to enter my password in order to log in. So now that we know our SSH key is set up correctly, I'm going to show you one more thing that is important in getting this to work properly. You have to update the SSH daemon configuration file. So let me pull this up for you. So what you want to do is when you're logged in, either as this account or the admin account on your Synology, you want to do sudo vim etc ssh sshd config. And what this is going to do is this is the config file which the Synology is using to manage its SSH daemon. And that's the process that is running all SSH connections. So the big things that you need to update in here is when you first open this up, there's going to be two lines that are important for you to have. And if you don't have these proper, it will not work. The first one is public key authentication. This line is typically commented out. You need to uncomment this line, and it will, this allows public key authentication to occur. The next thing is this line right here, authorize key file. This tells you which file it's going to look for to determine if the key is authorized or not. This will also be uncommented. I think the default would actually work, but this is the configuration I have right now and it's working. So go with that. And if you want to try the default option where you comment this out again, be my guest. The last thing that is important, and by default this should be configured, but it is right here. It is the challenge response authentication. Change the node to disable. Yeah. This should also be uncommented and its value set to no. So now that you have that, that is about it. The last thing that I'm going to mention is that I have read that if you look at the folder that we are in, so we are in the root folder for our user. So this is our home directory, right? And var services homes is where all of the accounts have their folders. So for Git admin, you're going to notice the permissions here. By default, Synology puts the permissions at 777. And I have seen some people say that you need to have the folder here set to 755, right? So read, write, execute. And then the last one is just read and execute, and it skips the write. So for Git admin, you would do this, and that just makes sure that those values are set. It has something to do with the SSH daemon not working if it feels the folders are over privileged, and that's about it. So hey, you have set up SSH. It took me a while to get this working. I ran into a lot of problems, most of them caused by me trying to use a key that I generated using Putty and uploading the public key onto the Synology. I think due to the format differences, it doesn't work out. And so that was a bad time, and I wasted a lot of hours trying to figure that out. But now we're good to go with our SSH login. I'm going to do one more test here where we're going to try to upload to our Git server using my Windows account, and hopefully it won't prompt me for a password anymore because we have our SSH key already generated and stored in our user's SSH folder, right? So this guy right here, hopefully that will be used. So let's try it out. So to do that, I have a folder where I have my Unreal repository, and I wrote a PowerShell script. It's actually incredibly simple. There you go. So the PowerShell script basically adds all files that aren't already added to the repository, commits them with some random latest comment, and then pushes them to my server. So if I run this now, theoretically, it's going to run and not, oh, okay. But it is still asking me for a password. I wonder if it's because it doesn't know what happened, or maybe which user it's trying to connect with. So let me dig into this real quick, and I will be right back with the fix. Okay, everybody, I think I figured out what was going on. So you actually need to update your Git installation on Windows, and it needs to go from, you need to go to Program Files, Git, etc SSH, and here you're going to find a file called SSH Config. So I opened up that file, and this is what it looked like, okay? The only thing I did is I copied this line right here, and I put it down here at the bottom, right? This one's commented out, obviously. So I think what this is saying is that this is the ID private key that you should be using. So identity file, this is one of the files. So the tilde means your user root directory, .ssh ID RSA. And I do have, we go back to this. So remember earlier, I downloaded the private key from our Synology, and then I converted it to a Putty file so that Putty could use it. Well, I just downloaded the original again. So these are two different files. One's for Putty and one isn't. So this is the original IDRSA file I generated through SS Keygen on the Synology. So now that I have this installed, I've saved my SSH configuration in my Git installation. I should be able to run my PowerShell script without entering a password in order to check in my code. So let's try that again. And I think you can see that is nothing but success right there. So there was nothing new to commit because we had already committed it, but it did successfully connect via SSH to our Synology, our repository, and it pushed the contents without a password being needed. If you learned a bunch today and you're pretty happy, then please hit subscribe. Thanks for your time. Have a great day and a safe day. Thanks. Bye.